So we're looking this morning at how we convert metric units one between the other. When we are measuring something, whether it's length or area or mass or capacity or volume, we use different units, okay? So for instance, if I was going to measure the length of my little fingernail, what units might I use? Alex? Millimetres, yeah. If I was going to measure the length of my glasses, what would I use? Marshall? Centimetres. Centimetres, very good. What about if I was going to measure the width of this room? Marlo? Metres, very good. How about the distance from here to Mandra?
Millimetres.
Kilometres, thank you. Okay, so obviously you pick the unit that is most appropriate to measuring the object or the thing that you're measuring. Because you wouldn't measure here to Mandra in millimetres because the number would be ginormous. 11 billion. That's not a real number, by the way. So, we're going to look today at 4 different things. We're going to look at distance. We're going to look at area, but we're not actually going to cover that this year, but I'm just going to show you because there's a real neat trick that relates it. We're going to look at mass or weight, and we're going to look at capacity. So let's start over here with distance. So we had the 4 measurements that you said. We've got millimetres, centimetres, metres, and kilometres. Now, let's put some arrows that join them together. Okay. I'm going to come back to this one because this one is the most complicated, okay? Here we're going to have millimetres squared, centimetres squared, metres squared, and kilometres squared. Okay, so let's go down here and back this way. This one is probably the hardest, but when with the trick, it's actually quite cool. Then we've got, if we're going to weigh something, so say for instance, you were weighing the mass of a Panadol, you know, like a tablet. What would you measure that in?
Milligrams.
Milligrams, that's right. That's right. And actually, 1 Panadol is 500 milligrams, okay? So if you take 2 Panadol, you're taking a gram of Panadol, so 500 milligrams. So what would you weigh an apple? How would you weigh an apple?
Kilogram?
Grams. If you were just weighing 1, yeah, grams. Okay? Then how would you weigh yourself? I try to avoid this as much as possible. Well, how
Kilograms.
Kilograms, that's
Tons.
right. I hope you were talking about yourself there, Alex, and not me. We never mention a lady's weight. It's very, very, very naughty and dangerous for men.
About tons.
Okay. And then obviously, as Alex says, tons. Okay, because that's the heaviest one. So, I'm going to just do arrows like this for these ones because reason being that these are all the same. You have to do the same thing because they all have the same relationship with each other. Then over here we'll have millilitres, litres and kilolitres. Okay? These also have the same relationship with each other. Reason being, there are, listen, 1,000 milligrams in a gram. The word mille means 1,000 in Latin. There are 1,000 grams in a kilogram. There are 1,000 kilograms in a ton. Okay? There are 1,000 millilitres in a litre. And there are 1,000 litres in a kilolitre. Okay? So, the other thing that's really quite cool about this, and I didn't really even realise this until relatively recently, that all of these things have a relationship between them. 1 millilitre of water weighs 1 gram. So 1 litre of water weighs a kilogram, and it would fill 100 cubic centimetres. So if you could make a cube that was 10 by 10 by 10 and fill it with water, that would be a litre, and it would weigh a kilogram. So all the measurements are related to each other. It's really clever. So what we have to do here, to go from milligrams to, it's all by 1,000, okay? This way we divide, and this way we multiply. So to get from milligrams to grams, we divide by 1,000. To get from grams to milligrams, we multiply by 1,000, okay? Grams to kilograms, divide by 1,000. Kilograms to grams, multiply by 1,000. This is the same, okay? We divide on this side, multiply on this side, okay? So they are relatively straightforward because the only number you have to remember is 1,000. You do have to remember whether you've got to multiply or divide it, but you only need to remember the 1,000. Now for this one, we do have to remember some different numbers because the relationship between the units is different. So there are 10 millimetres in a centimetre, say it with me, 100 centimetres in a metre, 1,000 metres in a kilometre, okay? And if you look here, 10, 100, 1,000, you remember that it goes 10, 100, 1,000, it gets bigger. So, to go from millimetres to centimetres, we divide by 10. To go from centimetres to metres, we divide by 100.
Isn't it the other way around?
No, millimetres to centimetres, 10 millimetres, divide by 10, 1 centimetre. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
10 millimetres is 1 centimetre, isn't it? So 10 divided by 10 is 1.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
It's a very good question though, and I'm really glad you said it because that is the major thing that people get confused. Okay? Because you'd think, wouldn't you, because millimetres are small, that you would multiply to get the next unit, but you don't, you divide. Okay? So, centimetres, you divide by 100 to get metres, because 100 centimetres is 1 metre, so 100 divided by 100 is 1. You with me now? Do you see it? Good. Metres to kilometres, what would we do? Divide by 1,000, that's right. Okay. Now, the beautiful thing about maths, of course, and we learnt this in our algebra topic, the inverse operation. If the relationship between millimetres and centimetres is divide by 10, and if the relationship between centimetres and metres is divide by 100 and divide by 1,000, what will the relationship between kilometres and metres be? And what will the relationship between metres and centimetres be? Alex? Well done, we'll multiply, because that's the inverse operation. So we multiply by, again, 10, 100 and 1,000. So, let's just do a few examples. 2 kilometres in metres. So, start with the kilometres, look at what you have to do. 2 kilometres is 2,000 metres, okay. So 200 centimetres to metres.
2 meters.
2 metres, because you've divided by 100. Okay. 67 millimetres to centimetres.
6.7.
6.7, that's right. Now, you can go from millimetres to kilometres. Okay, you would have to divide by 1,000,000. The way I do it though is I do it in 2 stages, because then you know that you're going to get it right. Because I can remember 10, 100 and 1,000, but I can't remember, is it 1,000 or is it 10,000 or is it 1,000,000 or is it 100,000 that I have to multiply by? So if, for instance, I've got to go from kilometres to millimetres, I would do it in 3 stages. So 1 kilometre, I've got to change it to millimetres, okay? So I'd first of all change it to metres, so that would be 1,000 metres, because I'd times it by 1,000. Then I would change it to centimetres, so it would be 100,000 centimetres. And then I would times it by 10, which will give me 1,000,000 to change it to millimetres. But I've done it in 3 stages and it's a lot easier. Okay. Now, these 3 you need to know for year 7. Okay, we do this in year 8, but I just wanted to show you this cool trick, because if we write the same thing, divide by 10, divide by 100, divide by 1,000, times 1,000, times 100, times 10. That's not correct though, because here we've got millimetres, which would be to the power of 1, wouldn't it? Here we've got millimetres to the power of 2. Here we've got 10 to the power of 1. Who thinks they might know what we do?
Would it be 20 divided by 20?
No, good try. You're on the right track, but you've not done the right calculation.
You have to put square.
Perfect! Divide by 10 squared, divide by 100 squared, divide by 1,000 squared. So 10 squared's 100, 100 squared's 10,000, 1,000 squared's 1,000,000, and then 1,000 squared, 100 squared, and 10 squared. So all you have to remember again is the 10, 100, 1,000, but if you're dealing with square units, it's 10 squared, 100 squared, 1,000 squared. Okay? That's next year's stuff, but I just thought I'd show you because it's quite cool, isn't it? Just putting the little squared thing there. Okay, thanks.